Okay. The reason I've been able to produce so much is that I'm not a perfectionist. I'm an imperfectionist. I'm confident that everything I say can be improved upon by others. And that's my greatest strength. Because I know that it won't be improved upon by others unless I take the first step. When we only do things that please us or don't frighten us, after a while, fewer and fewer things please us. Over time, our circle of options diminishes until we are prisoners in gardens of our own making. The more decisions you make in your life, the more times you act, the more certain it is that you will be wrong. To be fulfilled, we need to recognize, all of us, that the world doesn't owe us a living. Rather, we owe the world a living. And in the brief time that is given us, we must somehow learn to give ourselves away.
I muted you, Shelley, while you were futzing with your. So you want to start that over again? Sorry.
All righty, how's that?
Good.
So we are not able to pass a basket on Zoom to collect an offering, but I would remind folks that giving an offering, it's about money, yes. It's also very much about worthship. And I remind you of the mission of this congregation and this denomination. And so I invite you to give your offering. I believe there's a way that you can donate online. And if you have your pledge, you can always send that in. But please remember, whether you're doing it later today or Wednesday afternoon, you are doing worthship when you bring your offering. So thank you. And we have another reading that Bob will be doing, Shaky Skaters.
Roller World is a typical roller rink that rents our foul-smelling skates with fragile laces and then pounds your ears senseless with hard-driving rock music. Roller World caters to people with no standards, no taste, and no class. Like my family and myself. I love Roller World. No one was born to skate, but there we all are. A room full of unlikely skaters doing our best. A few, of course, are hot shots, whizzing around on one foot backwards half the time, breezy as you please. And another bunch, sad to say, is hopeless. They're 8 little wheels completely ignoring mission control. But round and round the rest of us go, steady and solid, one foot and then the next, in careful time to the Beastie Boys or Twisted Sister. Folks look pretty darn good out there. I suppose I do too. No one knows that if even one word is spoken in my direction, I will lose my concentration and hit the floor hard. No one realized that if they come up behind me too fast, I will panic and crumble into the wall. No one can see that this steady skater is so precarious that the act of skating, just skating, takes everything. As we roll round the rink, uncertain of our stride and rhythm, may we yet see the instability of those who surround us. May we help when we are steady, holding those who falter. May we calm the reckless and urge the timid forward. May we keep gentle company with the skaters at our side. Let us move with the spirit of love, and may some quiet presence help us with our laces at the end.
Thank you, Bob. Perfectionism is so seductive. It promises so much. Perfectionism whispers satisfaction. It coos respect and admiration. It intimates acceptance and appreciation. Perfection beguiles us with assurance of progress and success. It insinuates confidence and the ability to have control. Oops, sorry about that. Speaking of lack of control, my sermon went away. Oh dear. All righty. Maybe. My apologies. What a great way to start a sermon on mediocrity. There we go. Stop. Stop. Okay. I think I got it. I didn't really want the sermon to be completely mediocre, but I'm approaching that. Because so many of us want to be perfect. I would like to appear perfect. And when these little glitches happen, it just reminds me how much I'm not perfect. And then it's easy to move into judgment. And somehow we get the idea that if we are perfect and if we do it all just right, people will like us. We believe that we have protection and safety. And perfectionism compels us. The expectation of fulfillment and peace, it lies to us. Our culture is saturated in the exaltation of perfection. It is venerated to the point of idolatry. Every corporation touts unparalleled, comfortable customer service. All schools are top-notch. All restaurants are fabulous. All vehicles are outstanding. All of them are boasting J.B. Powers Awards for excellence. From childhood, people are taught the importance of striving to be the best. If people try hard enough, they can be excellent at whatever they set their minds to. Working hard, mastery, skillfulness, competence, accomplishment, and high standards are the watchwords for all endeavors. If something is worth doing well, it's worth doing it all. Or if it's worth doing it all, it's worth doing well. Pursuing any goal means aiming for the top, the ultimate. And if for some reason beyond our control, we cannot be the very best, our defense needs to be that we gave it our personal best. Perfection, striving for perfection, have become the measure of our character and a moral imperative. Nothing, except nothing, but the best. The biggest problem with perfectionism is that it is based on faulty thinking. It gives us an illusion of control. If we can do a job perfectly, we will be spared criticism. If we have no faults or foibles getting on our way, people will like us. If we try hard enough to do it right, nothing is outside of our grasp. If we do something beautifully, we will feel satisfied. If we are flawless, we will stand out in the crowd. If we manage to make it all brilliant, we will be safe. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do things well or to be our best, but perfectionism isn't that. On some level, perfectionism is about control and fear. Somehow, we buy into the fallacy that doing a spectacular job at work will save us from criticism. Yet most of us have learned that people can always find something to disparage. There's the painful reality that being perfect does not make people like us. Instead, we gravitate toward flawed, quirky, messy people who, because they are so likable, remind us that we too can be loved with all of our warts. Excellence no longer guarantees notoriety. When almost everyone and everything are described in superlatives, when fabulous, awesome, magical, brilliant, phenomenal, great, and profound are the words that we use for good. It's almost impossible to be set apart. In a culture that demands everything be over the top, nothing is over the top. Sort of like getting A's in high school and college, and then going to grad school and finding out that A's are the expectation. Nothing special here. A job well done is satisfying. A job done perfectly is frustrating and exhausting. Albert Bandura, an American-Canadian psychologist, explains how difficult it is for perfectionists to be pleased with their work. The higher a person's goal, the less chance they have of doing it flawlessly. And perfect is not just about the final product. It also means that there are no mistakes, no stumbles, false starts, problems with the teleprompter when you start. So it is perfect, not just in achieving the goal, the final product, but the process itself has to also be irreproachable. Perfectionism employs all or nothing thinking. It has sort of a if-then analysis that has no wiggle room. If good parents are loving, kind, balanced, attuned to the need of the child, wise motivators and disciplinarians, and always there physically and emotionally for their children, and I do those things, then I'm a good parent. If I don't do all these things, then I am not a good parent. When perfectionists don't meet their goals, they judge themselves harshly and catastrophize. So instead of questioning the reasonableness of their goals, they question themselves. And instead of backing off, they push harder. It is not a leap to understand the link between believing that if we can manage something, we won't be surprised or harmed by it. If we can regulate one area of our lives, other areas could be regulated too. If we can do it all right, we will be all right. All this work just makes it so clear. It underlines the spiritual maxim, we only try to control that which we fear. Perfectionism is a catch-22. Psychoanalytic theorist Karen Horney explains that it's the tyranny of shoulds that erodes people's self-esteem and their lives. We will never be good enough. Enter mediocrity. It's not special, outstanding, stellar. It's average, middle of the road, nothing to write home about. And it is the road to freedom from perfectionism. I have a good friend, and she shared with me that her superpower is not to give any Fs. And it has removed so much stress from her life. It's not that she doesn't try. Actually, she does great work, better than most people I know. She has managed to free herself from the impossible mindset that she can always do better. And the delightful emancipation from perfection to good enough frees her up to do better work. Just explaining the perils of perfectionism to people rarely helps much. Telling them about the many ways it is detrimental to their physical, emotional, and spiritual health doesn't make a dent in the struggle to always be better. Arguing that doing something ideally does not inherently make it or the person more valuable, or that statistically it's possible because everybody can't be on the top of the class all the time. None of this deters people from falsely believing they should be the best. It does make a difference. Discovering the joys of mediocrity. Dr. David Burns, creator of the feel-good approach to treating depression and anxiety, gave his patients the pleasure predicting sheet. So individuals who are caught up on that hamster wheel of desperately trying to do their best were asked to keep a record. They would write down the activities they planned to do. Next to them, using a scale from 1 to 100, they were to predict how much pleasure they expected to experience. After said activity, they rated their own performance. How well did they do? And finally, how much did they enjoy it? Over and over, people were shocked to observe that many of the activities they did in an average or below average way were the most rewarding. One physician with substantial academic accomplishments was surprised to learn that they could have greater personal satisfaction in doing a below average job of fixing a broken pipe that had flooded the kitchen than in giving an outstanding lecture to a group of medical students. This thoroughly debunked their belief that we can't experience any pleasure from an activity unless it is performed in an outstanding manner. Challenging the all or nothing thinking opens avenues previously unthinkable. Who would have thought that lowering their expectations would make life better? Especially in an age where the focus is constantly on exceptionality. Research repeatedly demonstrates that when people lower their standards, they are less stressed, frustrated, and anxious. One perfectionistic high school principal was having trouble sticking to his jogging routine, and he began to dread jogging. And it was suggested that instead of trying to run farther, he should just consider his jogging done for the day if he ran a quarter of a mile instead of his usual 5 to 10 miles. Anything beyond that would be gravy, optional running for pure pleasure. And he also agreed that if he did any of this optional running, that his goal for the next day would be to do half the distance that he had run the day before. So not making any gains, but going backward. And he reported that as a result of these modest goals, his aversion and anxiety disappeared, and he was able to adhere to his jogging program consistently. The same strategy, he reported, improved his outlook and productivity at work. He found it surprising that the lower he set his standards, the greater his output became and the more satisfaction he experienced. He was able to improve his output substantially. It struck him as odd that as he began to aim increasingly for average, other people seemed increasingly impressed. And eventually he was able to just give up his perfectionism entirely and became addicted, he said, to the idea of being average. It's a novel idea that a task does not have to be done perfectly. It just needs to be completed. That good enough really is good enough. I've always found it encouraging that in the Hebrew and Christian creation story, God created the world and at the end of each day declared that it was good. On the sixth day, when the world was complete, God said it was very good. So according to these sacred texts, God said very good, not perfect. It turns out that mediocrity, average, ordinary, commonplace, and middling are good for the self-esteem. Since a perfectionist is never satisfied, allowing oneself to be pleased with okay removes that need to perform. Trading impossible standards and expectations for lower ones may or may not decrease the quality of our performance. But in return for letting go of perfectionism, we gain more freedom, flexibility, opportunities for joy and creativity, and less compulsion and constraint, more independence and room to move. Chances are I have not given you any earth-shattering news today. I can even admit with some irony that this sermon is mediocre. And certainly my presentation today is less than what I would like it to be. But let's take it one step further. So far, mediocre has carried the connotation of average. Mediocre can also mean subpar. It can be just in the middle, or it can be lower, second rate, inferior, shoddy. And here is where the spirituality moves to a whole new level. What if we made the decision to be dull, tacky, and just plain bad? Now, as a minister, I'm not preaching about lowering your moral and ethical standards. However, do you realize how much audacity it takes to be unapologetically lousy at something? How many times have we opted out of an activity or a class because we didn't want to look bad? We avoid being the beginner. It's uncomfortable and perhaps vulnerable. Our pride keeps us from trying something new. Or we can't resist our desire to always be decent at what we do. But we can at least always hold on to the caveat that we're learning. We'll get better over time. So if we can't be perfect, we can always be improving. Well, maybe not. When I was researching this sermon, one of the loudest noises was the declaration that mediocrity is a sin. It is complacency. It's giving up. Life is too precious to be lived in mediocrity. We have an obligation to be our best. Success is striving up to your own potential. The correlating chant to this voice is that most people are too fearful to move beyond the common and average. It requires courage and fortitude to be extraordinary. And those who are content to stay where they are inferior to those brave souls who move into the realm of excellence and magnificence. It is proclaimed that one could accept mediocrity because of some immutable fact. Average is palatable only when there's no other choice. It is not okay for mediocrity to be the goal. I beg to differ. The individual who is not ashamed by charges of complacency or withered by the calls of cowardice is pretty secure in their own skin. This is an act of faith. To truly believe so much in the inherent worth and dignity of every human that no one longer feels the need to prove their worth. That's a statement. And it's also an act of humility. True humility is always about what's real. It's grounded as the earth, humus. So it's not bragging, it's not playing down, it's just honoring what is. What if someone had the goal of playing the saxophone abysmally? What would it mean if someone aspired to dance awkwardly, write crappy poetry, and then move on to god-awful woodwork? What would it say about living up to their potential if people tried out things, did them ineptly, and then either continued to do them ineptly or moved on to do something else in a new egregiously manner. Could it be that less than mediocrity is a path to mindfulness, allowing oneself to be present in the here and now without this underlying plan of mastery? In a world that screams at us that we always need to do better, doing a shoddy job just for the joy of doing it is a small but powerful.
I lost the sound. Did anybody else?
Yes. You're all of a sudden your mic quit working.
Oh,
Now there it worked.
it's back?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll start the definition of grace again.
Okay.
So grace is not something that you can get. It's only something you can be given. And it's not something that you have to do. And there's not something you have to do. And there's nothing you have to do. You just reach out and take it. Welcoming the pedestrian, uninspired, the schlocky and cheesy aspects of our life without insisting on improvement may be one of the most intrepid acts of faith we can manage. It's acting on the conviction that we are worthy of respect and dignity, period. It gives us a solid spiritual base. There's a great story in Rachel Naomi's book, Kitchen Table Wisdom. Here she tells of one of her patients. This patient had chronic fatigue syndrome and spent several years seeking help for her symptoms. She would go from doctor to doctor, obsessed with the minutest detail of her physical problems, in which she tracked in a daily journal. She thought she had to be without symptoms to enjoy life, to go to the theater, to have children, to love. It seemed to her that life could only be lived by the well. Then, in meditation one day, she saw that her chronic disease was not stopping her from participating in life. Rather, it was the meaning that she had assigned to the illness. She was surprised to find that there was absolutely no reason why, if she felt weak or was in some pain, she couldn't still go to the theater. It might take her longer to get to her seat if she felt poorly, or she might end up needing to leave early and miss the last act. But otherwise, operating from the way in which she defined her illness, she would have missed the whole play. Today, Dr. Reman writes, she has stopped pursuing perfect health. What she has and what she does is she tries to strengthen her body in simple and natural ways. Instead of seeing 4 or 5 doctors a week, she now only consults her doctors for serious problems. She has discovered that by being willing to begin without the certainty of an outcome, she's often to do a great deal more than she would have thought. Laughingly, she says that she has made a substitution for the cross-stitch sampler that hangs on the walls of her inner life. It used to say, life is only for the well. Now it says, anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed. One last piece to the spirituality of mediocrity, and that's the Japanese practice of wabi-sabi. It is seeing and celebrating the beauty in that which is flawed or worn. It's the opposite of loving the shiny and new. According to Japanese legend, a young man named Suno Raku sought to learn the elaborate customs known as the way of tea. And so he went to the tea master, who decided to test the young man by asking him to tend the garden. Sober Q cleaned up the debris and raked the grounds until it was perfect, and then scrutinized the immaculate gardens. But before presenting his work to the master, he shook a cherry tree, causing a few flowers to spill randomly onto the ground. Riku understood to his core that there is beauty in imperfection and profundity in earthiness. As a single idea, wabi-sabi fuses two moods seamlessly: a sigh of gentle melancholy and a sigh of bittersweet contentment, awareness of the transience of earthen things, and a resigned pleasure to simple things that all bear the mark of transcendence. It depends on the ability to slow down, to shift the balance from doing and being to appreciating rather than perfecting. The spirituality of mediocrity offers emancipation from the tyranny of the shoulds and the never-ending drive for perfection. It exposes the illusion of control, inviting us to experience life more fully. It calls for a more authentic humility, and it refutes the mantra that amazing is the new average. Embracing our own mediocrity when it is stranding in the middle, and when it's on the lower side of inadequacy, that demonstrates our faith in the second UU principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. A radical dance declaring that worth is not earned. Spiritual mediocrity encourages us to abandon our pride and delight in play. Nothing has to be mastered to prove ourselves valuable. Nothing has to be done well to be enjoyed. And contrary to all that consumerism would tell us, there is beauty and loveliness as something that is well used, just as it is. May we have the courage to ignore the internal and external demands for excellence. May we worship by entering into new experiences with low expectations. May we revel in the joy of comfortably doing things badly. May we have the faith to aspire to be average. May we embrace the freedom of knowing in our bones that we are enough. Amen and amen. So this is the time in our service where we get to hear your thoughts and your wisdom.